Cool. Well, let's kick off.
Yeah.
So you've been in the marketing game, Romney, for over 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, big question, but talk us through your career and that journey.
Yeah. Career of two halves, probably. So the first decade in agencies. So worked in advertising, product and design agencies for 10 years. The longest stint within that decade was about 6 years at an agency called Albion, which worked with a lot of startup clients. One of those was an infamous short-term loans provider called Wonga.
We'll get into that.
You might remember, yeah. But what Albion really afforded a lot of us to do was, like, when we worked on a client for a long time, is actually get into that client's business and do secondments. So I spent a year in the marketing team at Wonga, and then kind of came back to the agency and realized that I kind of caught the bug and wanted to work in a startup myself. And so, yeah, after that, I had 10 years at Albion. Not 10 years at Albion, 6 years at Albion, and then a decade of agencies. I moved in-house, so I was the second marketer at a business called Habito, which was a digital mortgage broker to start with, and then became a digital home buying service and lender, actually, in its own right. So, yeah, moved there quite quickly, was the only marketer there, and ended up spending 5.5 years as VP of marketing at Habito. And yeah, since then, I was part of the founding team at a savings app called Communion, and then spent a year at digital wealth manager Sidekick, and I'm now VP of marketing at Kuda, which is a Nigerian neobank. So yeah.
And what stage are Kuda at the moment?
So yeah, more of a scale-up, 6-year-old
Okay.
bank. Founded in 2019 by Babs and Musti. But it definitely the biggest fintech I've worked in. It's got over 700 employees. I think it was 728 today. Marketing team is 35 people, and we have over 7 million customers as well. So yeah, it's
Across
Series
Africa,
C.
7 million, or was that more?
Those 7 million are all in Nigeria.
All in Nigeria, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Nigeria is a massive country. It's something I didn't fully appreciate before I joined. It's the 6th most populous country in the world, which kind of blew my mind.
Pretend that I knew that.
Yeah, 250 million people, and growing rapidly. Like by 2050, it's going to be the 3rd most populous country in the world. So yeah, massive country, massive opportunity. So 7 million customers sounds like a lot, but yeah, still just getting started, and like lots of room to grow.
And so that, as a role challenge, seems quite different to Albion or Wonga or founding your own startup or Sidekick, for example. So what motivates you to build the Kuda brand? What's sort of getting you going with Kuda?
Yeah, I didn't think I would end up at a Nigerian neobank next. I think after that lengthy stint at Habito, where I probably did my best work and have like my best memories, and had a huge impact. I've been experimenting with a few things. So founding or being part of the founding team at a savings startup was a huge amount of fun, like really tough, and didn't end up finding product market fit ultimately, which and then Sidekick also, tough, like pre-seed, fintech, wealth management is a really tough space to break into. Big trust barrier, really complex products, often a need for advice, which can make it tough. And then I now find myself running marketing at a Nigerian neobank. I mean, what drew me to it was the huge opportunity. So the size of the population, the growing population, the second largest continent in the world, and with the second largest population, like a huge population of people who are underbanked and underserved by traditional financial services in Nigeria.
And as a marketer, like you say, through that journey, what are the major differences just from a stage perspective at early stage versus a Kuda, which is more of a scale up, and like you said, the biggest fintech you've worked at?
Yeah, I mean, early stage is all about finding product market fit, so building something that people want, which is how Y Combinator puts it, but very astutely, very apt. So it's a lot about talking to customers in the early days, making sure that the product you're building solves a need that they can't get solved elsewhere. So you kind of need to find a niche and find some unique angle, or at least just like really tap into the psychology of a specific group who might feel like the other options out there aren't for them.
And just on that,
Yeah.
because that makes sense conceptually, but how do you actually go about doing that? Because that's like incredibly hard to do, I imagine.
Yeah, so market research is obviously a big piece of the marketing puzzle, and it often just involves talking to as many people as possible, setting up things like customer councils. So at Communion, for example, when we did identify who our ideal customer profile was, we recruited a bunch of them, we got them into a WhatsApp group, and we were just talking to them as often as possible, multiple times per week. We did that kind of outside of the product, so that we weren't like biased by the product itself, so we weren't doing it in the product. Some of them were customers and some of them weren't, or users, or some of them weren't.
So what was it structured? Would you have like a structured question you wanted to ask that group, or would it be very sporadic? Right, we're going to mess them a few times a week, but it'll be about anything.
Yeah, I say we were a team of 5, so very small. I had a proper structure for that, laid out, exactly how many times we'd be in contact with them per week, and what they could expect and what would be expected of them, and then would do it on track and on plan, but then also have the opportunity just to like drop questions in sporadically and get feedback on screens or on marketing ideas, and even involve them in our marketing. So yeah, it was paid, so they were paid to participate, so you pay people a small fee, and when you get people who are up for it, like, it's great. But obviously once we grew our customer base, we could do this sort of thing a little bit more ad hoc, a little bit more sporadically with the customer base as it grew. And when you've got people who are really into the product and using it every day and asking for improvements, those are usually the people that you then tap up for further engagement like that. So you can quite quickly build out like a community, customer council, with your super users or the people who are really into it.
Okay, so in the early stages, trying to tap into the psychology of the customer, or understand what your niche is, sort of customer, what did you call it, customer groups?
Oh, customer council.
Customer council
Yes.
will help with that.
Yeah.
And then once if they become customers and they've been quite engaged, then they become your super users. You can get feedback off more often as the company grows. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, we saw, Monzo's the classic example of community building in fintech, and they were very early to the game and set up a community of developers who helped shape the bank, and they hosted hackathons, and you'd come into the office to pick up your card. So they were the early pioneers of community-based marketing, growing fandom. I think, that's become tougher for sure. And a shortcut can be to, find people in your ICP, pay them a little bit of money to join your WhatsApp group. Ideally, you grow that organically and it's not paid participation. Yonder's done a great job of doing that on Slack as well. Again, like not paid for. And so
And just with Yonder, so they invite people like customers to their Slack and ask them questions.
yeah, I know you know Tom and
Well, they're a client of AgClear, so
yeah.
and obviously Tom, is an advisor, and Tim's actually coming on the pod, so I'll ask him this when he comes on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should ask him. I know some people. I haven't joined the Slack, but yeah, I know some people who joined the Slack, and yeah, it's a sort of sneak peek of features and a place for them to ask questions and to get customer feedback and for customers to suggest things that they might want. So yeah, lots of fintechs have done a really good job of community building and tapping into their community for insights on what features and products to prioritize, and I guess also marketing ideas and recruiting customers to be part of marketing efforts as well. Again, Yonder just used a bunch of customers in their most recent out of home campaign, which I know went through you guys.
Yeah, it did. We made a big song and dance about the campaign because it was great and because it went through actually.
Yeah, I saw that.
Cool. And going back to the initial question, because I kind of derailed us a little bit. So if the early stage is about what we just discussed, what is it like at Kuda now? So how does that change as you scale and you have 7 million customers, I think? How does it differ?
Yeah, it differs quite a lot. That said, when I joined Kuda, there wasn't much of a marketing strategy in place, so I did have to set those foundations up. So there wasn't this notion of an ICP at Kuda when I joined either. So that was the very first thing I did, was try and understand the customer alongside trying to understand the market and the culture and the team and the industry and the regulation and all of those things. But customer was the first thing I tried to get to grips with. So had to identify who Kuda's ICPs were, because it's a retail bank and it has a business banking offering as well. And yeah, once I did that, I put everything through that lens. So Kuda now is very focused on its ICPs across the retail and business banking divisions. So we put everything through those filters. We now know who they are and who we're after.
And who are they?
So they are, young, aspirational Nigerians aged 20 to 35. So we have a full demographic profile of who these people are. We also have a bunch of stuff around their lifestyle and their attitudes and their needs and wants. So it's a living document that I circulated once it was written, but quite quickly found it to be cold. So, used customer data, used all of the sort of documentation that existed within Kuda all over the place to write down who these people were, but really needed to understand them on more of a personal level. So then got like 10 of them together, interviewed them for hours on end, got a bunch of video clips together, and it's now a document where you can sort of see and hear who these people are and hear them talk about their lives and their needs. So yeah, we have a very clear view of who they are now.
So again, I guess the problem is kind of the same at both, whatever stage you're at, is like
true.
Learning about your customer, what's your niche. When you're first starting out, as breaking into that, and then when you're maybe at Kuda's scale, it could be, we've got this wide customer base, but who are we actually really serving? Like, what's the value of Kuda?
Yeah, very true. I actually hadn't thought of how similar those two approaches are. I mean, I guess what I'd expected a business at Kuda's size and scale to have a clearer view of who its customer is, or who ideally it would want its customer to be. So putting that in place, I guess, is fundamental at any stage of business. And yeah, just so happened that Kuda didn't have an ICP or a set of ICPs in place. So yeah, understanding that is always the first step for me personally.
Okay. Yeah. We'll go back to your time at Wonga and Habito a bit later, but you mentioned regulation, which obviously means I have to pounce on that and ask you about regulation.
Yeah,
so between Obviously, you marketed predominantly in the UK, but when you look at the UK regulations versus Nigerian regulations, what are the stark differences, if any, between those markets?
So yeah, the second half of my career has been like a decade in UK fintech predominantly. So I'm only 6 months into my time at Kuda, and yeah, the 10 years before this have all been, in the UK, working in various fintechs across mortgages, savings, and investments. So the FCA is a regulator that I know well, and I think they've done a really good job of marketing their requirements of, the companies that they regulate. So, the fair, clear, and not misleading, those principles have been like drilled into me over the last 10 years. I always think they could have done a slightly better job. So FCA and then fair, clear, and not
There's
misleading.
an opportunity there.
They're kind of, they missed a trick there. But I think those principles are just like fantastic principles to carry through to work that you do in any regulated business, in any regulated environment. So the regulatory environment in Nigeria is very different though. So the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, is very involved in all of the, financial services business that are part of that. So the banks specifically. And then there's the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, so ARCON, who we kind of have to put all of our work through to get approval. I think that the big difference is how involved the CBN is in all of the banks, and how much kind of we have to run past the Central Bank of Nigeria, which includes like all large marketing campaigns. We need to give the CBN a month's notice and share stuff with them. So we kind of need to wrap a campaign up and then give the CBN a good amount of time to kind of sit with the campaign before we can go live with it. Archon is a little bit quicker, but yeah, some of the practices are a little bit, interesting and different compared to the UK. So a lot of work is submitted to Archon via WhatsApp.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, there's a member of my team who has a relationship manager who they predominantly communicate with via WhatsApp. Archon issues certificates of approval that are handwritten and scanned in. And there have been times where some of the requirements from Archon have felt like really restrictive. So, at times they've asked us to submit, a lot of work to them via the postal service. So we would have to, and if you think about like digital advertising and how you submit that to the regulator.
How do you submit a video?
Yeah, good question. Good question. We've had to talk to them about that, and we've had to set things up like WhatsApp chats, and yeah, it's just a very different regulatory environment, and you have to pay for everything to get reviewed. So yeah, there's payment for review, and there are different, there's a different rate card for different assets and different timelines on reviews, so you can pay to fast track reviews and that kind of thing. So yeah, very different, something I've had to learn to navigate and rely very heavily on my team in Lagos to do all of that work for me.
Why do you think it is that way? Like, it sounds like they're being extra careful, which isn't a bad thing in itself, but it's just interesting. Is it because it's a newer market for this sort of product that they need to be extra careful? Is it a culture thing, or like, I'm just curious why it is that way?
Yeah, I've had to learn so much about the way that the country operates, and these government bodies operate, and what regulation is like in the country. So why it's like that is, I mean, you asked whether something like this is newer. I think they obviously, banks have been around in Nigeria for a long time, but digital banks, neobanks, are a newish thing. Kuda was the first neobank 6 years ago, and yeah, they are. They do keep an eye on the neobanks and the digital banks, probably more closely than they do on the big traditional commercial banks. But I believe we're all subject to the same regulation. Uh, Often it's a revenue question for the government. So it's a way for the government to fund these regulators. It's a way for the government to earn revenue, and that seems to be the main driver. They want to keep a closer eye on the digital banks, but there's also a question of sort of funding these departments as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And then beyond the evidence logging and auditing and communication channels with the regulator, would you say the regulations themselves follow the same principles as the UK around fair, clear, not misleading, or would you say they're actually fundamentally different?
No, very, very much follow a similar practice. So the Consumer Protection Department of the CBN has very similar principles. It's not fair, clear, and misleading, but it's not far off that. So, yeah, they have a consumer protection. What's it called? Consumer protection. I forget. But yeah, like their logbook or whatever is kind of very similarly worded to the FCA's handbook.
Okay. And then going back to your 10 plus years in fintech marketing in the UK and the dealing with the FCA and the regulator, how would you say the typical marketing compliance approval process happens at fintechs with the FCA, both internally and then dealing with the regulator if that situation arises?
I mean, usually, yeah, I really like to closely partner with legal and compliance people in the fintech businesses that I've been in, and I've worked with some really fantastic compliance people in my time, and tend to lean heavily on their knowledge of handbooks and MCOB and all sorts of very specific regulations.
Well, you'd have done MCOB, BCOB, COBs, across the mortgages and savings and investments. So
all the COBs.
All the COBs,
Yeah, exactly. So, when you do work with a compliance person who knows their stuff, like it makes life so much easier. And then just over time, you tend to know what the watch outs are and what's needed as a baseline, and then you make their lives a little bit easier. So yeah, it tends just to be a really close partnership, shared Slack channels, lots of conversations, regular weekly check-ins, if not more regularly, because stuff is going out all the time. And yeah, your compliance people really like to have an eye on stuff before it goes out and approve stuff. So yeah, just collaboration and close partnership, really.
So from a post-publication perspective, in terms of once something has gone live with the Finfluencer or even your own internal marketing, have there been instances where the rate has changed or the claim you made in the promotion changed and you had to change the asset itself, change the caption, take it down? And if so, what does that process look like?
Yeah. I think working in a business that involves savings products, so both Communion and Sidekick had a pretty complex savings offering. Rates are something that you often want to lead with because they can be a really enticing hook, and we know how rate sensitive savings customers are, and also the savings interest rate has been the highest it's been in years very recently. So that is always something you have to keep a very close eye on, because you want to talk about rate a lot, and the rate is always changing. So the Monetary Policy Committee will meet 8 or 10 times a year, I can't remember, but they'll meet and make a decision on rate, and savings providers will move with that rate decision. So often you'll have a piece of communications or an ad or a partnership or something live that talks to a rate, and you'll have to do something about that very quickly, change tack. So yeah, that often involves pulling something down, changing it, and you just have to keep close tabs on where you are with what communications at all times when it comes to savings products. So that's like one example that comes to mind immediately. Yeah.
I can imagine trying to find all of those assets that you publish that lead with a rate could be problematic.
Yeah, you have to be pretty organized. So you have to have Notion tables with all of the partnerships in place. You have to go and inform those people of rate changes pretty quickly. You've got your duty to your customers to tell them of a rate change that's coming up. You have to get into your ad libraries, and you just have to be pretty well organized. Rates is definitely a pain because they're all over. They're all over your website. They're all over your terms, your FAQs, emails that go out. So yeah, you got to be really on top of it with rates.
There's a company called AdClear, I think, that help with a bunch of that sort of stuff. You should check them out.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, zooming sort of back out and going to your Wonga and Habito days. Okay. I'd love to hear on the marketing side now, any examples of campaigns that really shifted the perception of the brand or really had a significant impact at both Wonga or Habito?
Yeah, so I think Habito is probably a better case study and much more interesting from a marketing perspective. So at Habito, when I first joined, we started talking about very rational benefits. So again, as a mortgage broker, one of the big benefits of using as a broker is that you end up with the best rate possible. Again, going back to rates, so there's savings interest rates and borrowing interest rates. And yeah, so very rational benefit of using a mortgage broker is that you end up on a great rate and you don't overpay on your mortgage. So we started with messaging in that vein, talking to rational benefits, money saving, whole of market, ensuring you get the best deal, and just very quickly realized that didn't resonate with people. Like, no one wants to talk about mortgages. As soon as you start talking to someone about a mortgage, like if they're not in market, they're very much not interested. And when they are in market, it's very much to do with the house that they're buying. And then they are very interested and need to move quickly and are facing pressure from all sorts of parties involved in that transaction, like an estate agent. So what we very quickly did was, again, just get to the root of the customer problem and the customer insight, which was just like how hellish that process is to get a mortgage. I don't know if you've gone through the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very painful.
Yeah. So it's, an extremely painful process. And we kind of got to the root of what those big pain points were for customers. So it was the amount of paperwork that you have to fill in and all of the jargon involved in that paperwork and how slow everything is, how much time it takes, how it feels like everyone involved in this very complex transaction is kind of out to get you. No one's on your side. And then when you look at the rest of the industry, it's stock imagery of people picking up moving boxes and
or keys by the door.
That first kind of lick of paint on a wall. And it just doesn't talk to the reality that a lot of people face. So yeah, the campaign that we went out with was called Hello Habito, and very much kind of contrasted and brought to life the emotional pain that a lot of people go through in getting a mortgage, and contrasted that with Habito as the solution to that pain, which the product was built to do. So yeah, lots less paperwork, much quicker times, someone on your side, and then like the good rates and the fact that you're not going to overpay on your mortgage is kind of secondary to all of that, right? Like Habito is just there to solve a problem and take your pain away. And
so tangibly, what did that look like? Was that, I don't know, meta campaigns or out-of-home advertisements, a lot of spend? Was it organic? Like how did that, once you had that concept, actually kind of work in practice?
Yeah, so a very strong creative platform in Hello Habito that was then rolled out across every touch point. So um, website, paid search, paid social, TV advertising, radio advertising. Yeah, a huge amount of assets that were created from the Hello Habito creative platform. And that looked, incredible, gory, like worked with animators, worked with a skateboard illustrator called Jimbo Phillips on a lot of them. This incredible animation studio, and it was very cartoonish, deliberately so, because we could really dramatize those pain points in a way that was like visually very arresting. So, to dramatize the fact that using a traditional lender or traditional mortgage broker to get a mortgage took a long time. There would be like a skeleton on the phone, like being burnt alive. There would be, to dramatize the fact that no one was on your side. A bunch of piranhas would come and sort of rip a person to shreds. So there were, some very like dramatic and unconventional visuals for Habito to dramatize those pain points.
And it's an interesting contrast, I guess, to what, like you mentioned earlier, can be quite a boring topic if you're not in market, or you are in market and you're dealing with this problem.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
And then in terms of the metrics and like what you were looking for from all those different creative outlets, what was it the number of users, brand awareness? What were you really tracking?
I mean, yeah, ultimately everything was down to customer acquisition and mortgage completions, which is where Habito got paid. So, but the trick in the mortgage industry is to be front of mind. So this campaign was devised so that when people were in market, they would think of Habito. So as suggested, as you said, like no one wants to talk about mortgages, no one wants to think about them. There wasn't a brand in the mortgage broking space at all. People would associate the mortgage with the lender that they would end up on, or a high street bank. So our job was to make people think Habito when they thought mortgages. So brand awareness, and done so by disrupting this category and standing out in a way that no one else was doing.
Cool. And then in terms of question AI, because we are an AI company, when you think about generative AI and the amount of content you can now create and personalize, if you were to do those campaigns again, do you think you would have leveraged generative AI in the production of those assets?
Definitely not. I think we were able to come up with a campaign that was like very crafted, very considered, very intentional. Like every detail was poured over in that campaign. So I think generative AI has its merits and has its uses. We use it at Kuda to come up with quick concepts and test them on paid social, see what gets traction, and then if something is working well, we can craft it more and take it further and perhaps invest in shooting it or some sort of higher production values. But a campaign of that scale and of that size and blown up on billboards and on TV, no, definitely not. I think generative AI has its uses, but it's still not there from a craft perspective. I think like when you've got a high bar or you've got like a lot of specific taste that you want to put into something, it's just not there yet.
It's more that conceptual brainstorming partner.
Yeah.
For example, at Kuda, then I think, to be honest, I think that's an interesting way to look at generative AI. I don't think it will replace all of that workflow, but it can help in certain areas to speed up the initial thinking or some of the iterations and things like that.
Yeah, to sell an idea in or to concept something quite quickly. It's pretty good for that.
Nice. Last couple of questions. First one being, if you were to give a marketer in the financial services industry a piece of advice, let's say they're joining a startup, what would it be?
Advice. I guess my advice would just be to be resilient. Like being a marketer in a financial services business, in a fast-moving fintech, is tough. Like it's tough to navigate all of the stakeholders, all of the regulation, be creative within the regulatory framework. And I think if you can do that, there are like huge rewards to be had. But it's not easy. So you have to persist. You have to like go through a lot. It can feel like ideas are being watered down sometimes, but there are ways to be creative within the regulatory framework.
So looping compliance, collaborate with legal, and be
Yeah.
creative within that framework.
Yeah, like having, I touched on it before, but having a strong relationship with your legal and compliance team is paramount.
Final question. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have about Kuda, about marketing, about regulatory frameworks? If not, I've done a great job, but that's usually something I've missed.
Just now me critiquing
Yeah,
your interviewing
You've got
style.
the time back now.
No, I don't have anything to plug.
Okay, no book coming out or
no book coming
album
out.
or anything like that.
No, nothing coming out.
Not getting into Afro beats or anything like that. No, okay.
Oh, I mean, Nigeria is an incredible country, and we did partner with an Afrobeats star when Kuda launched in 2019. So an Afrobeat star called Fireboy, not to be confused with Burna Boy.
Yeah, that's where my mind went to initially.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like the cultural landscape in Nigeria is amazing, and yeah, the whole launch positioning of Kuda was as the bank of the free. So the way that Kuda got traction in the Nigerian banking landscape was by disrupting the commercial models of the big traditional banks. So the bank of the free was about free transfers. So again, interesting that in Nigeria, bank transfers, which is the most popular way of paying in Nigeria, so like card usage, Apple Pay, those sorts of things just are not trusted and not used very often. So the bank of the free was all about free transfers, so 25 free transfers a month, which was, very innovative in the market at the time. But more than free transfers, it was about this feeling of freedom from the tyranny of the traditional commercial banks. So yeah, Kuda's whole mission is around being more accessible, more affordable, and more rewarding for Africans. And yeah, the Bank of the Free was a really great encapsulation of that.
So the Afrobeats campaign, what was his name?
Fireboy.
Fireboy.
Yeah.
Not Free Boy or something like that. That might have worked well.
No, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Romney.
Pleasure.
Super
Yeah,
interesting. Really, thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.